Hi. Would it be okay with you if I just read some of my book to you? I wrote it and I just kind of want someone to review it, and I thought you'd be a good person. Cool. So I'm gonna be reading chapter 1 and chapter 2, and I think maybe chapter 6 as well. I don't really work in order. I kind of work out of order. So some chapters, like chapter 3 isn't finished, but chapter 6 is. So I can start reading to you. This is chapter 1, Fort Alexandra. This is Charlotte's point of view. I was 6 years old when I realized I was never supposed to be born. He, the man who called himself my father, had made sure I knew it well. He had never referred to me by my name, and he would only speak to me directly if it was to punish me. At first, he would have me sleep on the top bunk so I wouldn't disturb his peace when we were gathered in the bedroom to sleep, and some days I would be forced to sleep by the door in the hallway. On those occasions, passers-by would swerve around me and hold their rosaries tight. Rarely, my mom would come out to serve me potato soup, and when she didn't, I would dream that she did. She would hug me tight and wipe the tears off my cheeks. She would take me to the bathroom and wash off the sweat and the dirt before tucking me into bed with her. Of course, I would still wake up dirty and would thread up tears holding my eyes closed. Eventually, my father had decided to kick me out permanently. I would sometimes still sleep in front of the family's door in hopes that my mom would come out to see me. She seldom did, but she would look at me with eyes full of pity, and she would carefully hand me an old cob of corn, which I would devour within seconds. Being homeless at 10 years old in a city in which everyone believes you are possessed by the devil meant an extremely limited amount of food and shelter. I couldn't sleep in the alleyways, as people would kick me, scream me, or use me as public bathrooms. So I would usually sleep in tiny crawl spaces or vents. Eventually, you get used to stealing trash and the line between surviving and living starts to blur. You will learn that you can only trust yourself and that respect is something you will never earn. Love is something you will never be allowed to feel. The alleyways we lived in were always particularly humid, and the stifling summer heat only intensified the discomfort. Today was no exception, as I made my way up the staircase, lugging a heavy bucket filled to the brim with slightly murky water. With each step, sweat spills down my forehead and pools on my upper lip, my sleeves sticking to my arms from the intense toil. Upon reaching my landing, I let out a weary sigh as I hefted the bucket into my living space. My living space of choice was a tiny crawl space I found a couple of weeks ago, which I covered up with some trash bags. It's safe for now. I am fully convinced that I have found my way around the entire city in these, what must have been 6 years. The city's maze-like nature made it impossible for any person to truly know where they are going when outside of their neighborhood, but I think I've got it figured out. I carefully cupped the water from the bucket into my hands, making sure to spill none, before just as carefully washing my face above the bucket, then my arms and my legs. There is nothing I want more at this point, on a hot summer afternoon, than to catch some fresh air. Catching fresh air in Fort Alexandra usually meant making your way up to the roof, unless the sun is directly positioned onto the courtyard, which is usually covered in the shadow of the tall apartment buildings. To give you some visualization, I based Fort Alexandra around Kowloon Walled City. I think that is such a fascinating point in history and time that I decided to base my own fictional city off of it. After making sure no one could see me getting out of the crawl space, I carefully climbed out before covering the opening back up. The air in the hallway still felt heavy and humid, and my body is still sweaty. Exhausted from climbing the stairs, I plop down onto the floor and feel the refreshing wind through my nearly entirely gray hair. It smells like the rivers of the dead and alive infected kept behind the fort's walls, but it mostly smells like just a little bit of freedom. The walls are about a mile away from the large packed city, with its surrounding area being used as military bases as well as a few farms. Hold on. I lost my... Alright. And here is Serenity's part of the chapter. I grieve for the lives that will be lost in the same way a wolf mourns the loss of its prey. My father has made sure that I am acutely aware of the loss of life and the weight it carries. I watched as the first of my comrades begin to climb over the wall. I know it's time. The high security this place supposedly says it has isn't very high, Robert says. I glare at him, annoyed with his weak attempt at a joke. The air in this place is stifling. I see Anna attempt to hide her disgusted facial expression, while Robert doesn't even try. I scoff at his lack of social awareness. Vincent remains expressionless. I see his short head bobbing next to me. A girl around the same age as me is carrying a bucket with brownish water in it. She looks annoyed and tired, angrily mumbling to herself. She is skinny and lacks any type of womanly curves. On top of that, she's dirty and her hair is tangled, but somehow she still looks effortlessly pretty. Come on, Serenity, I hear Anna call. She must have seen me lingering. We figured out a plan. We go over the plan. It's simple yet effective, or so we hope. There's nothing else we can do but hope, and despite the weight of the situation, I can't help but feel a dreadful sense of determination. I have worked too hard to let anything stop me now. We continue to navigate ourselves through the maze of tight hallways that these people call home. Once we locate one of the fort's water supplies, we set to work adding the parasite-laden medication to it. It's a slow and tedious process, but we remain careful and focused, knowing the importance of our mission. After all, these were not innocent lives. These were the enemies of our people. I could hear some of them talking and laughing nearby, completely unaware of what we were doing. It's done, Anna said as she finished up her work. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and unease. I need to place that. Thank you. It's hard to say when it will start to take effect, Anna replied. The first infected person should be roaming around by tomorrow. Could be weeks until a real outbreak with how close off every corner of this place is. She rubbed sweat off her forehead while speaking. I nod again. We should find a place to stay until then. The fort seemed like a labyrinth of dense hallways and a closed door of small apartments, making it difficult to find somewhere discreet. After a few hours of aimless roaming, Robert crashes into a set of trash bags posed against the wall in a ridiculous or dramatic fashion. To our surprise, one of the bags pushes into the walls on impact and reveals a tiny crawl space. It's barely big enough for one of us to get into, though I bet Anna would be able to sit up in there. We leave to continue our search for a place to set up camp without bothering to put the trash bags back into place. That was chapter 1. This is chapter 2, titled Charlotte, and this is obviously a chapter with only Charlotte's point of view written in it. It's Monday morning, and I'm 5 years old. I wake up as my mother gently brushes her hand through my hair. Good morning, baby. Class is starting soon. I open my eyes and slowly sit up. I take in the cozy simplicity of our shared bedroom, where the worn bunk bed and the cramped dresser seem like luxurious staples in the grand scheme of life. And I understand how hard the council works to house as many people as possible. As my mother busies herself in the small kitchen, I slip into my school uniform, feeling the familiar fabric cling to me. I sit down at the table, which is small and circular. Above it hangs a picture of Mary, as my mother sends a bread bun before me and carefully braids my hair. I make sure to leave as soon as my mother finishes braiding my hair, and my brother Kane follows quickly behind me. I hear her whispering something to my father as I leave, but I don't worry about it. As we step outside and start our walk to the classroom, the narrow alleyways of the city come to life with activity. Despite the limited space, there is a sense of familiarity in the air. The smell of fresh bread and sweat fills the alleyways, mixing with the chatter of other students, parents, and grandparents. "Open your books where we left off last time, please," my teacher instructed us. I didn't really like school, but what I loved about it was the windows on the side of the classroom looking into the courtyard. The courtyard was a communal area right in the heart of the city, within its middle, a big church. The teacher clears his throat loudly before he starts reading a chapter summary in the book. 474 years ago, Liberta launched an unprovoked attack on our island, driven by their desire to steal our riches and power. Thanks to our Lord's guidance, we managed to survive through the devastating attack and continue to stand strong and resist their tyranny. I see a brightly colored snapdragon in the courtyard. This chapter we will learn about the war, read stories from our brave soldiers, and learn about the effects of the DV, the decomposing virus. He suddenly goes quiet. "Charlotte," the teacher says sternly. Shocked by a sudden change in tone, I look away from the courtyard in his direction. "Is the courtyard more interesting than the history of our community?" "No, sir," I replied. "That's what I thought." He cleared his throat again before continuing. "The Liberation military had begun their attack by poisoning our community's water. Drinking this water would implant a controlling parasite into their bodies, though it affected people in various ways, some becoming too weak to walk and some becoming inexplicably strong. The same physical symptom occurred. It started decaying their bodies while they were still alive, and they wouldn't die for years onward unless put out of their misery." I raised my hand, feeling a couple of heads turned towards me. "Yes, Charlotte," the teacher said. I could tell he was a bit annoyed with me. "But why would they attack us for no reason at all, with such a drastic virus?" He looked a bit shocked by my response. Couldn't there have been more factors involved? Other motives besides their desire to steal from us? Wouldn't it be more likely for them to have attacked us with a traditional weapon? I continued. At this point, the classroom had gone silent, and I could feel a few dozen kids staring at me. Could they have been trying to protect themselves from something we had done? You could hear a pin drop. Clearly, my teacher wasn't happy with me. "See me after class." I nodded, and the teacher took a deep breath in, regaining his composure, before continuing with the lesson. "Moving on," he says briskly before continuing the lesson. As the classroom empties out and I remain seated at my desk, the teacher approaches me. His expression stern and serious. He takes a moment to gather his thoughts before speaking. The tense silence in the room is almost palpable. Finally, he speaks, his voice low and serious. "Charlotte, your question suggests that you have been thinking deeply about our history, and that is a good thing. However, it is important that we understand the past clearly." I nod quickly, afraid of any punishment that might come from my question. The teacher's voice softens, the seriousness in his tone fading a bit as he continues. "But I do appreciate your curiosity and your desire to understand the truth behind the events of the past." He pauses for a moment, considering his words. However, it is also important that we remember that the past can be complex, and there may not always be a clear or simple answer to our question. He looks at me intently, waiting for my response. "I understand," I respond promptly while looking down at my hands. The teacher nods, appearing satisfied with my response. "Good. Now we continue with Chapter 6, Serenity. This one is also only written from Serenity's point of view. When I was 7, I fell and scraped my knee. I sat there and cried for 10 minutes straight. My mother eventually came out, her face stern. "Stop crying, child," she yelled, her Northern Liberation accent acting as its own reprimand. "I want father," I said through sobs. She squatted, making eye contact with me. Well, he doesn't want you, she said, her tone as sweet blades at her chest. Her voice as sweet blades at her chest. That's better. Her voice as sweet blades at her chest. I stared at her through sobs. Her face remained neutral, and her eyes were cold and hurtful. The rage I felt inside of me had yet to slow, and my tears turned into anger. I wanted to shout and scream at her, to tell her how much her words had hurt me, but I was too young and too fragile to do anything but cry. Instead, I just stared at her, the pain inside me growing even more intense. My mother continued. Her tone is icy and authoritarian. He has plans for you in the military. Do you know what they will do when you cry like this? The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. It was a rhetorical question. I already knew the answer. The military has no patience for tears and weakness. It is no place for soft, crying children like me. It is a place of strength and discipline where my tears and my weakness won't be tolerated. They'll laugh at you. They'll mock you and they'll call you weak. Weakness will get you nowhere. Only the strong survive. I won't cry, I said, my voice quivering with determination and fear. My father enrolled me in the military when I was 9 years old. I quickly rose through the ranks, surpassing many of my peers and earning a reputation as a skilled and determined soldier. When I once again fell and scraped my knee, I didn't cry. As I looked down at my scraped knee, I felt a surge of frustration and anger at myself. I had been so careful and so focused, and yet I had still managed to fall and scratch myself. It was a reminder of my own imperfections, and it enraged me. Stupid, I muttered under my breath. Despite the pain, I clenched my teeth and pushed myself forward, and as I continued through the rest of the boot camp, I found that my injury only served to make me more disciplined and more focused. I felt a sense of determination and strength growing inside of me. I gritted my teeth, refusing to slow down, and forced myself to keep going, ignoring the burning sensation and the blood trickling down my leg. I could hear my fellow soldiers gasping and grunting as they struggled to keep up with me, but I didn't let it impact my speed. I pushed myself harder and harder every day, never allowing myself a moment's rest. I ran until my lungs burned, and I lifted weights until my muscles screamed in protest. But no matter how hard it got, I refused to give up or show any sign of weakness. I began to see myself not as a weak child, but as a powerful and skilled warrior, ready to take on whatever the military had to throw at me. The injection itself wasn't bad. A long, thick needle was injected into my arm. I know Robert had to be held down. He was always scared of the process. The doctor had told me I took it better than most. The process of transformation was much more miserable. I lost a lot of hair, my nails turned black, and my eyes and skin got much paler. Eventually, my hair came back and my nails became normal, but nonetheless, the first few weeks were trying times for us all. And that's all I had so far. I do hope you enjoyed it. Let me know any criticisms you have, but don't be mean, please. Yeah. You can go now.